Well, hello everybody. I have with me today Kathy Beale and Andrew Brewer. They've both been on my channel. I've been on Kathy's podcast as well. And I'm kind of got t-shirt jealousy today. You guys know I love my t-shirts because they're wearing their matching Democratic National Coven t-shirts, and I'm wearing my Harris Waltz Sun t-shirt. So we are here. We're just going to wrap a little bit about the election and about what's upcoming for some of the players involved in all of this. And we're just going to take it where it leads us for a while, for about an hour. So you'll find it interesting, I think, the conversation, bringing in different points of view, different things we've seen in the astrology, but Andy as well is a well-renowned psychic, and he makes his psychic predictions very publicly as well. We've all predicted that Harris will win, but we just thought it was good to look at some of the things. So if it's all right with you two, why don't you two tell my followers just a short little bit more about yourself before before we share charts and things. So Kathy, you first.
I'll go first. I have been a professional astrologer for 35 years. I also, during most of that time, practiced law. So I have a background, I have a packed ninth house, basically, in my chart, and I've lived it out many ways. So I look at things from both an incredibly logical point of view and also with a fair amount of intuition and looking for the big picture. One of the things I am fixated on is what I call storytelling astrology, where certain degrees or certain aspects will jump out at me and I'll start tracking them. And I have found it to bring a really high degree of accuracy. And I have a number of little storylines I can add to this conversation. My site is empowermentunlimited.net. I put a lot of stuff on Facebook in a group called the Astro Insight Lounge that picks out things going on in the current world and how they are playing out the transits. And that's just some of the stuff. And I also have an ongoing near daily conversation with Andy about all these things. So
and now it might be a three-way one. But anyway,
yeah,
Andy.
right. And Louise and I are always messaging. So Mr. Brewer.
Tell everybody about you.
My name is Andy. I am professional psychic, kind of reluctantly got into this way back in the 80s. I've been on TV. I've done a bunch of stuff. I've been called the most controversial psychic in the world. That's always a good time. And so I use astrology. So I'm going to try to keep up with two master astrologers. But primarily, I work on emotions. I try to feel the collective emotions and make my predictions based on that. I've said for a long time a lot of things about Trump, which people didn't believe at the time, which seem to be playing out now. And I'm excited to be here. Two magical women, and I'm just going to kind of ride along. But just real briefly, I was very adamant that Trump would have issues like he had in 2020, and I've been very adamant about how I think it's going to play out in 2024. And I expect Kamala to win. I don't expect any issues from Trump. I expect him to try, but I don't really expect much to happen. And so, hi. So here we go. And I'm representing the Ohio delegation of the Democratic National Coven. So thank you. And thank you, Kathy, for my t-shirt.
And I'm representing the Utah delegation. But anyway, there's a few things we've noticed that we wanted to talk today about quickly, going through a couple of things. Elon Musk we'll come back to, but I want to thank Gary Lorentzen in the Mundane Astrologers group on Facebook for pointing out the chart for the last fascist convention at Madison Square Gardens that took place in 1939 on February the 20th. at the same spot. You know, you cannot make this stuff up. And then when I'll take his chart off, if we put the chart in for last night or yesterday, apparently the meeting that happened yesterday started at 2:47 p.m. Gary Lorentzen is amazing at kind of sitting there with the stopwatch. and just look at this. If anybody missed it's quite horrible, you know, watching the whole thing. It was full of racist tropes. It was full on fascist, quite honest. Even one of the speakers said he didn't expect to be speaking at a Nazi rally. So there you go. And Nazi rally is trending on Twitter today, on Musk's own platform. But these are the transits at the time yesterday's rally started. And what we are noticing, of course, and what everybody's going to notice, is that Pluto was at exactly the opposite point. Mars is coming up to oppose Pluto. Juno was at where Pluto is transiting right now. But also there was a Moon-Neptune opposition, and Saturn is stationing direct conjunct Jupiter. There's quite a few kind of things. And also the angles were on the world points back then. And Vesta, which is the sacred flame asteroid, but is the sacred flame of the state, really, kind of the, you know, the empire, if you like, is today sitting on the ascendant of the chart from back then. Any other thoughts on this, guys? To me, this is almost like Trump's shadow having to, almost like he couldn't help himself bringing this out now, like this is his part in this game that we're all playing right now. What do you guys have to say about that?
Well, about when we were talking before the camera went on, Andy pointed out that the nodes in the 1939 chart, North Node at 10 Scorpio in the house of money, and then the South Node at 10 Taurus up there in the 8th house of resources and other people's money, is forming a T-square to Trump's Pluto, which is at 10 degrees Leo in his 12th house of backroom deals, hidden matters, criminality, self-sabotage. Pluto in the house of self-sabotage.
Yeah, and so of course, and this Moon-Neptune opposition, of course, is square his full moon birth in his birth chart and his nodes. So
this kind of has strung him up in a way with yes. Making a grand cross out of his sun moon.
And a big turning point. I always kind of see them as a turning point, especially the square to the nodes, the nodal square to his Pluto. Anyway,
I will point out that there was also a grand cross to his chart on August 19th of this year when the Democratic National Convention started. So this echoes that his a turning point, a turning point. I have more to say about the transits, but Andy, you got more on Trump or anything? Because we're just doing the talking.
Well, you know, I've always said, I mean, I've talked about a rise in anti-Semitism and a rise in neo-Nazism within the United States years and years and years ago. And of course, I was told that was impossible. And I've said consistently that Trump and his followers were echoing stylistically so many of the things that happened in the 1930s with Germany. And I predicted and consistently predicted that it would not take hold here as it did in Germany in the 1930s or Italy in the 1920s or wherever, because the collective emotional body in the United States doesn't match that. So there are basically more happy, reasonable, sane people within the United States. There are people that would go along with this philosophy. The other big factor here is that much as Trump and his followers try to paint the United States as a terrible place, the United States is a very prosperous, successful, magical place. So the conditions in Germany were much different. They had just lost World War I 15 years earlier. They're right on the tail end of the 1929 depression. So the political and economic climate is very different. So there's nothing about Trump that has surprised me. But because I have a more optimistic viewpoint of the United States, I don't feel that he can win. And in fact, I think that this race is much more lopsided than the polls would suggest. So we'll see. So that's my take on it.
I agree completely with you. And you know, that Pluto opposition really kind of, I always feel that when we look at a historical event, that's kind of being a bit mirrored by a new event. When they're in opposition like that, I kind of feel it's going to be kind of be a turnaround. So for him, in other words, or for MAGA, I think they've just kind of shown their true shadow, their true colors. And you know, Mars gets a bad rap in astrology. I kind of feel like it's going to cut it out. But anyway, Mars is going to go back and forth over that Pluto 3 times.
Right, and I want to really stress that for a moment because it's going to cross it at the end of this week. It will have crossed over it by the time we get into the election. And then it's going to cross over it again at the end of January, right after the inauguration. And then it crosses over it a third time at the end of March.
Look at the day that the middle one is, January the 6th.
Isn't that interesting?
That's the day the Congress certifies the election, by the way. So in case anybody's not aware of that, isn't it? And then the final one is April the 17th. So, and by then Pluto has moved finally into Aquarius fully. So, but of course it will also be there for January the 6th. So, you know, I do believe there are always echoes with these past charts. So I don't think we need to spend ages on it, but I just thought, wow, how fascinating that.
Well, may I make one more observation? The one other thing I want to mention is I want to point at that 12th house Neptune in the 1939 chart. It's at 22 degrees Virgo.
I'm just gonna
see that?
Yeah.
That's the US Virgo. That's the US Neptune.
It is.
So the US had its a Neptune return at that time. And you know, when we got into World War II, after that, there was a unifying vibe in the country, like an anti-Nazi, anti-fascist. Let's go fight them in Europe vibe. And Neptune has been opposing that. It's past the opposition now, but Neptune has been opposing that, which brought all these things back out of the woodwork. And I will point out that the Reconstruction also did what Neptune has been doing now. So we're in a post-Civil War messaging or revisiting of what our values are, and they're different, or there's the same kind of, what does this mean? What's the, you know, there's been a similar opposition. You phrased it well. At any rate, that's a factor in this as well, because Neptune in Virgo in the Declaration of Independence chart is in the 9th house of belief systems, and it has a lot to do with intactness of borders. It has a lot to do with racism and attitudes about immigrants, and all of that. All of that fits in this 1939 event, and definitely what we saw, unfortunately, on October 7th. All right. I have a lot more.
You know, I'm kind of glad we saw it, because hopefully more people will go, oh, this is too much. But anyway, and I think they will, actually. I do think they will. I think Andrew's right that she's going to win by a bigger margin than polls. Not polls. Anyway. So where should we go next, guys? Do you want to talk about Elon, Kathy? Because
well,
we have some news. Some people might not have heard it yet.
Oh, that's true. The Philadelphia DA has just indicted Musk for this lottery in Pennsylvania to get people to register for the GOP, $1 million a day or something. Additionally, prosecutors in Lancaster County and Bucks County have uncovered, imagine election fraud of registrations, phony registrations coming in. All of them, guess which party? So remember that I mentioned this 3-part Mars journey. There will be ramifications coming from that, but also we're at a time right now where we're wrapping up big cycles with Uranus, agent of sudden change, shocking change, and Neptune, the gaslighting planet, and Pluto, which has been moving through what our ground rules are and institutions, and they're all kind of like dancing in cahoots right now. And Mars is having contacts with them. Neptune is going to be having contacts with them. We're in a massive wrapping up period before each of these signs moves into another form. Neptune is the first to go. It'll go in November. The other two will dart in and out next year, but that's a piece of what is happening now. And with Musk, there's a lot of stuff. There's a big revelatory aspect to this, and terrific multi-directional pieces of news have come out about him that fit all of this, of being in contact with our greatest enemy when he himself has a national security, he has a security clearance, and he owns a major defense contractor, news that he has that he worked illegally in the country, and probably, if that's the case, then his naturalization application would have had a lie on it. And the fact that Biden actually spoke out about it, Biden doesn't talk about, he doesn't talk about people. He made a press statement yesterday about this. So all of this is something that has staying power. It's coming back. And it's happening with Saturn sitting out. It's been sitting at 13 Pisces, and it's about to station direct, right? It hasn't.
It is.
So
no, it's about to. 15th, November 15th, I think, isn't it?
So all of these things are like teeing up, and they all have legs. They all have consequences.
Oh, they do. So I'm going to get his chart up just for a minute, and because it's the way I kind of tune into it, but I'm not going to bother getting the other charts up, but I do want to say that he has this Nessus-Venus conjunction at 19 Gemini, which is conjunct Donald Trump's North Node. Nessus reveals abuses of power as a centaur. Also, his series is pretty much on Harris's ascendant, right? 24. They've kind of, he's almost like he's showing us kind of something about the others. Yeah.
His Mercury's on our sun, and he took control of Twitter.
Yes.
Now X.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Conjunct the USA's sun. Yeah. So, you can't believe. And his Pluto is being opposed by Neptune right now.
So his Pluto is trine the US Pluto, but his Jupiter over there at 27 Scorpio is exactly square the US moon, which represents people.
The people. Yeah. So, you could just say these people are just kind of perfectly playing their karmic destiny, if you like, really, in some ways. Andy, do you have anything to say about Elon?
I mean, I think that what it really speaks to is the way that geopolitical factors are influencing the way we frame this election, that are likely being created by outside forces that stand to gain from the United States being weakened from within. And we never really address that. And we don't address the influence of Russia or other parties, nor do we look at the ways that privatization has put United States national security at risk. So I think that There was an article in the Wall Street Journal, not the most liberal rag on the earth, just a few days ago. Kathy and I talked about this, showing how the Starlink system that Musk has, which there's a defense contract, much of NASA's rocket launching capability is tied into the Starlink system. It was being used in Ukraine as a support for Ukrainians, but then it appears as if that support was then moved towards Russia. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that I think we need to look at. This includes Trump, how Trump has been funded behind the scenes, Jared Kushner. There are a lot of things, but ultimately what it comes down to, in my opinion, is this. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say we found out that Elon's been talking to Putin, but go on, you go ahead too.
Yeah. Elon's been talking to Putin, and so we put ourselves at a certain amount of risk. And so this whole collective narrative from QAnon onwards has been to reframe the cognitive base for the United States, the majority of people in the United States, so they lose the ability to question, well, why is this happening? This doesn't seem to make sense. And that to me is a collective design. I've said for forever that Nazism would arise within the United States. This whole narrative of Trump and whoever's supporting Trump is basically based on appealing to people's vanity and their fear. And people who are tied into questions of vanity and fear tend to act in silly ways. And I think that that's really the preponderance of the United States on the Trump side. And now we're seeing in graphic terms what I said all along, which evidently wasn't graphic enough for people to see. I think that people are seeing now just where this was leading and that the truth is coming out. And I do think that people are going to say, no mas, we're not doing this. And that's why I think that Kamala will win big. I do not think that Trump will do anything to subvert the election. I do not worry about Trump's followers. I do not worry about a civil war. I don't worry about any of that. If Trump was in a position of power in 2021, he was a sitting president of the United States. He couldn't do this. He's not going to be able to do anything now. So Musk is motivated by money. Trump is motivated by money. And that's kind of the simplistic answer of it. And, I just don't think that fear is the fertile ground for Trump, just as it was for Hitler. And people are seeing through that. I do believe that. And so I think that the pushback, and especially thank God for women, that the pushback against Trump and this GOP Project 2025 agenda will fail. So that's my speech for the moment.
I do feel like it's a bit of a reckoning for the United States, though, for what we've allowed to leak in and take control and things. What's your thoughts on that, Kathy?
I correlate that to all the activity that's involved Gemini. No offense, Geminis. In recent years, so many players have been dominating the news, either are Geminis or, now we have Jupiter moving through that sign. And the reason I single out Gemini is that's the house in the Declaration of Independence chart that represents our allies, but also our open enemies. And these people have been hitting Uranus and Gemini, disruptor, discordant, chaos agents. Trump's got Uranus and Gemini in his 10th most public house. That's part of what he is. He's a chaos agent. He shakes things up. He shows things differently. And as Jupiter is making this pass through the sign of Gemini and blowing things up like crazy, there are going to be a couple of moments of containment. One of them was interesting date, August 19th, when the Democratic National Convention started, and this also pulled in Kamala's chart and her change agent signature that she's had since birth. And the next one is on Christmas Eve.
Mm.
And at that point, Jupiter is going to be on the US, on the doorway to the House of Open Enemies. And Saturn in Pisces is going to be squaring it. And that's like containment. So there may be a lot of nonsense. There may be a lot of stuff
Oh,
still going like, the noise level is going
oh,
to go beyond 11 if you've watched Spinal Tap. But it's going to get
there's,
contained. It's going to get
there's
contained.
gonna there's gonna be a lot more attempts, at least, to more fear raising and gaslighting, as you said, noise. That's very kind of thing. But with Pluto, as Kathy already mentioned, well, Pluto November the 19th, then we've got Neptune, and then we've got Uranus, all move changing signs, which has never happened in before ever, as far as anybody's found at the same time, all moving in what's called a mini grand trine together. So Pluto into Aquarius, Neptune and Saturn into Aries, and then Uranus into Gemini. I think this is an opportunity for the US to really kind of do things very differently. We've always got free will, unfortunately, but I still think we're going to. I think we kind of are reaching this reckoning point, and it's time to do things very differently from before. How we respond to it, do we just let it sink back down under, like the reflections of that 1939 chart, or do we really shore up all the institutions and rules, and really make it a government of the people, by the people, for all the people?
When you say reckoning, I think Saturn, and
Mhm.
Kamala's Saturn is on the
Yes.
US moon, the people. So she brings things together, she brings grounding, she brings containment. It's no
Mhm.
coincidence that she has a background as a prosecutor. She's a defender of
Yeah.
laws.
Yep. In her
I
ninth
got,
house. So, yep. All of that. Yeah.
I always go back to the collective energy.
Mm.
And I'm very optimistic about the United States moving forward. And I've said a lot of things
Me
that were
too.
probably not optimistic in the past, but I feel really good. And I think that this is a catalyst for change, positive change.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't worry
I
about Trump's followers. I don't worry about any of those things, and I mean, historically, my views of Trump were always kind of contrary to what was considered reasonable, but they turned out to be historically pretty accurate. I just think that he fades away. I predicted that he would be indicted for financial fraud and things like that, where people said that was impossible. I said that all these things. I believe Trump loses. I believe that Trump is in early dementia. I think that Trump ends up in prison or in a lockdown facility for geriatric psychological patients. I just think that we go into a happy space. And I think
mm,
that this collective racist white boy nonsense will go away. And
mm,
I've been very adamant in that vision, and I'm sticking with it. I mean, he could win. I find that almost next to impossible to believe, but I guess it's possible. But I don't think that any measures that he might plan on taking will work. There's no doubt that that's their ace in the hole, but it didn't work in 2021. It won't work in 2025.
mm.
That's what I
Yeah.
believe.
I'll back up one thing you said with some astrology, and that is Trump's birthday chart for this year, his solar return chart, has a stellium in the 12th house, which is the house of self-undoing. It's the house of institutions. It's the house of retreat. It's a house of imprisonment. And that included it was Jupiter, Mercury, Sun, Venus. And Mercury rules in his solar return chart, it rules his fourth house of home. That to me is not somebody out in the world. That is confinement. And that is in place
Mm,
at least through his birthday. Some think 3 months afterwards, but that's what he's in the middle of now.
mm,
That is not consistent with I'm going to go be the leader of the free world at all. That is consistent with I'm going to be stuck somewhere. And
mhm,
as I mentioned, and there are three big things in March that really back that up. I think just to throw some things in here, I looked at the chart for November 26th, which is when the New York conviction sentencing hearing is supposed to be. And assuming that the judge does not delay it again, it looks very much like a jail sentence is going to come out of that, which might be home arrest, might be a monitor, but it looks very much like a jail sentence is going to be part of it. And then in March, 3 things happen that are consistent with him not walking around freely anymore at all. And you and I have talked about this, Andy. So he's had a wrecking ball going across his midheaven, and
Yes.
and that's the 3rd time it hits. And when Uranus is crossing over the doorway to your public life, everything in your life changes drastically, unpredictably, and this will be the final push. Pluto's been sitting there using another predictive technique, or it's rotting, it's collapsing, it's falling apart, and it's going to be everything. And you yourself have said he will lose everything all at once. And I'm going to throw his marriage into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've said that since before he was elected. I said that in 2016. But there's an astrological component at work here too, which is that Uranus is up at the top there, is squaring his 12th house Mars. And any planet that is that close to the ascendant on the 12th house side is a form of fixation. So Mars and Leo, this desire to be this grandiose He-Man kind of thing. The ideology that there's this level of virility and power that people look to. It's a facade, and Trump is trying to play that out. It's like the traditional short man's disease. It's a compensatory, an emotional drive for him. I've said repeatedly that Trump has a low self-esteem, and he believes he should lose, and that the world is maneuvering for him to lose it all at one time, lose big. And that's what I expect. And so from an astrological standpoint, I think you could build a strong case that square with Uranus up there crossing his midheaven, that 12th house Mars in Leo is like a time bomb to his psychology, his emotional foundation. And because he's losing that ability to be slick and charismatic, in part that's because of early dementia, in part because he's under a lot of stress, he's fatigued. His natural ability to mask that is, there are like holes in that. And that's why so much of what he might have been able to do before is now working the same way. People are being able to see behind the magic curtain here. I just do not see any way that he survives this intact. He is in cognitive decline. The world is moving in alignment to say we're over it. And I think that it is I persist in my long-term speech that Trump is part of our collective karma, and our collective karma is a lot happier than his.
His Mars is opposite the U.S. moon, so part of what his role has been to stir up the anger. I mean, that's what he's been doing, stirring up the anger. And compare and contrast, Kamala's Saturn is on the U.S. moon. Let's calm things down. Anyway, so with Uranus being the focal point of a T-square there, his hold on all of this, his charisma is really getting blown up.
Yep.
And the other thing that was interesting about that 39 chart, just real quickly, was that I believe that Trump has a conjunction of Chiron and Juno in mid Libra. Is that correct? Like 14 Libra, something like that? I think so.
Does. Right. Yes, he does. They're at 14 Libra.
And wasn't Saturn at like 15 Aries in 1939?
I'm gonna get that chart back up again.
So in that, I mean, I think Juno has more at work here. Like, since Juno was opposing Pluto in 1939, and since and we talked about it before we actually started recording about, Pluto opposing Mars now and Pluto opposing Juno then, sort of inverted. And Saturn then is opposing Trump's Juno Chiron in Libra. Well, that's a kind of a power that Trump has, and I think that that's being eroded. He's as he draws more and more openly into this neo-Nazi, marriage in hell, his charisma can't. That's a bridge too far for him, and he's failing. He's not. The things that he's used in the past aren't working for him, and he's going down in flames, kind of as he should. So
absolutely, he is. I think, though, as a collective, as you've drawn us back to before, Andrew, we have to remember there's this whole movement behind Dump, as well, as I call him. I prefer not to say the name. There's the Peter Thiel, there's Musk, to go back to him, there's Vance, there's Opus Dei, there's all those kind of things. And I do think she's going to win big, but I do think we as a collective have to push really fast to get these kind of holes shored up, and get the Justice Department sorted out, and all the holes in the Constitution that they pointed out, and get the Supreme Court sorted out. Not make it all Democrat, no, make it all more even.
People who actually follow precedent.
Yes, yeah. So
I'd be happy if they just follow the laws as they were actually written.
Exactly.
I don't care. Let's find a middle ground. But if there's an existing law and it's been agreed upon, why don't we act as if there's some credence to that and apply it to everyone? If we did that, we wouldn't have this tremendous polarity.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Kathy, you had some interesting thoughts on Harris becoming Kamala. I'd love to.
So I looked at, yeah.
If you want to share a chart, you can share it, because you're co-host.
Oh, well, these are all. Let me just say what they are, as I know that we're her progressed. There are a number of developments in her progress chart and her solar arc directions, which are like what you've evolved into. So she has, this is why no one quite, she came across as very, very controlled and constrained until just recently. And suddenly she's this Miss Warmth and the joyful warrior. And I'm like, where did this come from? Well, she has evolved into really, really nurturing contacts from a number of directions with the US chart. Her progressed moon is on our sun. So her nurturing nature is on the identity of this country. Her converse solar arc moon, now that's just okay. So another way of looking at things, her moon is on the US moon. It is exactly the same. So what she has evolved into for what her emotional drivers are absolutely consistent with the people, the mood of the people. And she's and her connections. So that's Kamala right there. All right, that's Kamala.
Yeah.
And her connections in those regards to Trump are that she's what is going to get him. Her Mars, her solar arc Mars, is going after both his sun and his moon, and her sun is on her solar arc. Well, at any rate, I'm just babbling, but she has Martian Mars related influences that are going at him, whereas his are all at the US. His Mars, this is just incredible. His progressed Mars is on the US Saturn, so he's fighting our laws. He's fighting our stability. He's fighting our agreed ground rules, which is perfect. His Mars is opposite our moon, so he's been whipping up a lot of anger. His progressed Uranus is on the US Mars, so he is, again, a disruptor, a chaos agent, an absolute chaos agent. And whereas she's a stabilizing, nurturing factor, and if you just watch what her messaging is, it is that she refuses to say nasty things about Americans. She doesn't call people garbage. She doesn't call people
No.
deplorables. She doesn't. And she keeps saying there's a place for everybody. And here's what I'm going to do for the middle class. That's the moon. That's
Yeah.
where most people are.
Yeah, definitely. And isn't her progressed Saturn? Well, I know it is because I've done a bit on it. Her progressed Saturn moved, incidentally, by the way, her Saturn by progression turned direct because she was born with it retrograde. It turned stationed direct when she moved to Canada with her mom, and that was obviously a big turning point in her life. But anyway, it's in Pisces now and heading up towards the top of her chart, right? So,
And let me just throw in when the Democratic National Convention started, Venus, she was having her Venus return, and Venus was opposite Saturn. On January 20th, 2025, Venus and Saturn will be conjunct together.
they
Woman, the feminine
Yeah.
and the leader, and they'll be conjunct in the 11th and at that time, and in the sky at 11 o'clock in the 11th house of dreams and wishes, with Pluto in Aquarius conjunct the sun in the 10th house, a very new way of the executive, bold new executive, and conjunct Tim Walls's moon. So, it's any way you look at it, they're there.
There's so many. I mean, whether you love her or not, there's so many astrological signs to me that she is kind of here to be a healing force for the US in many ways. Mama, like you said, and I think she feels that in her herself. Andy, how do you feel into that? Because I know you talk about
I
this.
love Kamala.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
I
I
do.
think that she's fantastic. And the other thing with her, I mean, people who have power do not need to break the other people down, right?
Yes.
They don't need to try to level the playing field because they know they have power straight from jump. When you compare their charts, Kamala is much more the more powerful force between her and Trump, and she is standing in that power. And I think that one of the beauties of what's happening now is that women collectively are remembering they have power and they're standing in that power as well. I think that that would be the most fantastic thing that ever happened to this country was if we could eliminate some of these old cultural narratives designed to suppress women and keep them, barefoot and pregnant and let them really shine. We would be much better off. But the one who is the loudest is typically the weakest. And Trump is the louder of the two. He is the weaker of the two. She is the more competent by light years, but she's also the more powerful. And Trump's mythology of him as a powerful force is basically a mythology. Kamala is actually a powerhouse, and she exhibits that. And I think it's going to be good for people to see a biracial woman stand in power. And I think that that in and of itself is going to be a transformative healing event and process for people to see so that little girls can see powerful women and we can change the ways in which we basically ruin people psychologically as children. The United States is in a collective, is in basically PTSD. And I think we need to heal. And I expect that the next 20 years are going to be that healing. And so I'm incredibly optimistic. And I think everything that you two are saying about her is dead on. And I expect that she will, will be a catalyst for a lot of positive changes. And I think that people will, once they're given an opportunity to be seen and heard, will step up. I think that, the average person, quote unquote, gets a bad rap. They try to make this white boy elitist nonsense that they're the only ones that know anything. But there are a lot of people, in the communities who can make a gigantic difference. And I think that's also going to happen, which I think, and I'm not sure how the charts reflect that. You two will know that better than I. But I feel like we are ushering in. I mean, this is really a pivotal moment, right?
Mhm.
If 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 Hitler had not come to power, or Mussolini had not come to power, right? Would that have changed the direction of the world? Most likely, for sure, right? The United States is not going down some dark path, no matter how many people try to push it, no matter how many billionaires try to make it happen, no matter how many people sell out to Russia. It's not going to happen. People need to be in a happy space and try to stop worrying about it. Trump is creating, and Trump's followers and the media that support him and whatever apparatus is behind it are trying to create a climate where fear is driving people. And when they're fearful, maybe they're not going to stand in their power. And Kamala's like, oh, hell no, girl. I'm the one in control here. And that is an important message for all of us. And I think that she is a genius in how she's doing this. And I think that her campaign is just right on. And so, again, I am incredibly optimistic. And I still say she wins, and nothing happens that's bad afterwards. No matter what Trump tries, it will fail.
Can I say one thing about astrology itself, though? Kathy's actually already, we've talked for a gathering that I'm putting out in January, but talking of stories we tell through astrology and things, I had one commenter tell me she would not win because she has a debilitated son. Can I say bullshit? You know.
What does that mean? She has a debilitated son. Does that mean she's son like a square with Saturn or something? What is she talking about?
No, her son is in Libra, and so it's opposing Aries, a fire sign. So in ancient astrology, they said that was debilitated. And
every Libran on Earth
is could never be president or could never be successful because they have a debilitated son. Can we just drop those stories, please? Yeah. What do you say, Kathy?
May I just jump in with this as sort of a non-astrologer in the family? When I look at astrology, what I'm looking at is a group, like a cocktail party, and all these planets have personalities and they have to get together. And there's a time element, when it's your turn to talk now, and we're going to, the idea that one specific element defines anything, I don't go along with. It is the collective integration. That's why people are so magical, because it's a blend. Your astrology is a melting pot, just like the collective is a melting pot.
It's a whole story, right, Kathy?
For sure.
Kathy, you're nodding. You're looking like.
This explains why Vedic astrologers are saying that she's going to lose. I don't get it. Okay, well, all right.
Yeah,
that's
I know.
Simplistic way of looking at things,
isn't it? Yeah. Just no. Please don't do that. Anyway,
it's giving somebody a categorical statement. You're really, everything has a spectrum of possibilities, and if you cram down someone's throat, okay, here's my personal experience with this. First astrologer I ever went to told me I should consider any love life a gift from God. That's because I have Pisces conjunct my ascendant. You telling a 24-year-old, tough luck, little one, you have this. So, if you ever have it, you should be really, really honored. You don't make categorical statements like that to anybody about their chart, because everything has a spectrum, and the chart will say the same thing from 5 different directions. Always. Always. If it says it once, it says it this way, this way, this way, this way. Good grief. That's what makes me really angry. And you're playing into a level of playing into God. You're playing into, you're confusing yourself with the message. And no, you're giving us all a bad name. Stop doing that.
And that's why I personally refuse to use terms like debilitated and detriment or exaltation.
I don't use malefics and things. Whatever the rest of these things are.
Benefics, malefics, all of that, because you're putting that idea in people's minds. So just stop, people. Anyway.
Saturn can be nice.
Saturn,
right?
oh, Saturn
Can
be
be nice.
wonderful.
I mean, there's
I
a
love
lot of
Saturn.
things. I mean,
Saturn is
I believe
commitment, diligence.
it's stability. It's,
Yeah.
sometimes we need to organize the closet to find things. It's fine.
Yeah.
I just think that it's important for people to believe in themselves and to not let other people rain on their parade without
Yeah.
getting an umbrella and deciding to go out and dance anyway. And I just think that so many voices are trying to define a black and white narrative, which is not how the world operates.
No.
And it's not how individuals should operate. And so I've been on my little campaign why I was the most controversial psychic in the world, I guess, was because I was in opposition to people saying you're either this or you're this.
I know. Well, I've been on that campaign for a long time too, Andy. The best-selling book I wrote, The Complete Guide to Astrology, with a black and white cover, tried to get us to. Oh, he's disappeared.
We've lost him. Yep, he's back.
No, he's still there. But I was saying, please, can we just change the language and remember what the people you're speaking to are receiving. And I think we need to do that at all levels, not just with a consultation. We need to do it with how we speak publicly about astrology as well. It's just, anyway, that's my. So I think we've probably gone long enough, guys, for this one. If we get chance, we didn't have any more to say. We might.
It's been fun. Thank you both.
It's been fun.
Thank you very much, Louise, for doing this.
Yeah, I know. Well, I love doing these kind of rap kind of things. So thank you to both of you, and see you all next time.